All right, let's jump right into today's explainer because we are unpacking an absolute blockbuster of a tech lawsuit. Apple is officially suing OpenAI, and guys, this goes way beyond your typical corporate squabble. We are talking about allegations of a massive, highly coordinated hardware espionage campaign. Basically, Apple is accusing OpenAI of deliberately stealing their trade secrets to jumpstart their own AI hardware ambitions. Let's look at exactly what went down.
Honestly, the sheer audacity of these claims is just wow. According to the lawsuit, ex-Apple employees who were interviewing over at OpenAI weren't just polishing up their resumes, no. They were allegedly downloading highly confidential hardware manufacturing files straight from Apple's servers. One employee supposedly accessed this ultra-sensitive info and literally texted, "LOL, so funny that I can access this." I mean, you can't make this up. They weren't even trying to be subtle. Apple claims they were openly bragging about the whole thing.
So, who are the key players involved in this mess?
Well, OpenAI hasn't just been grabbing random engineers, right? They've been targeting top-tier talent. Enter Tang Tan. This guy spent 24 years at Apple, eventually running the show as VP of the Apple Watch. Recently, he jumped ship to join OpenAI's new hardware venture, which, by the way, famously includes legendary Apple designer Johnny Ive. So now Tan is OpenAI's chief hardware officer. But here's the kicker. Apple claims Tan was the actual mastermind behind this entire espionage ring. The lawsuit alleges that during job interviews, Tan was grilling candidates about super-secret, code-named Apple projects, basically using his insider knowledge to coax them into spilling confidential details.
And it gets crazier. Apple claims this wasn't just about sharing digital files or whispering code names. The lawsuit details these wild, show-and-tell allegations. Candidates were supposedly asked to literally smuggle physical hardware, like unreleased batteries and prototypes, right out the doors of Apple offices to show the OpenAI team during their interviews. If that's true, it is an absolutely stunning breach of physical security.
Which brings us to Apple's infamous history of revenge.
Look, to understand the sheer amount of danger OpenAI is in right now, you really have to understand how Apple operates. They hold grudges, period. And they have virtually unlimited resources to fight generational legal wars. Back in the 90s, they pushed copyright law to the absolute limit against Microsoft over Windows. In the 2010s, they weaponized patent law against Samsung over early Android designs. And today, they're using trade secret law to hammer OpenAI. The battlefield changes, but Apple's relentless take-no-prisoners legal strategy is exactly the same.
So, what does it actually cost to cross Apple? Well, look at this number. $1 billion. That's the staggering penalty Samsung eventually had to cough up after years of brutal patent litigation. To put that into perspective, crossing this tech giant is catastrophically expensive, and Apple will aggressively run these lawsuits into the ground to protect their turf.
When you contrast these two titans side by side, you immediately see the massive problem Sam Altman's facing. Apple is sitting on a war chest of over $100 billion in cash. They are highly focused and they are relentless. OpenAI, on the flip side, they're burning through cash like crazy. They're kind of strategically all over the place, pivoting from video generators like Sora back to enterprise coding, and they're constantly bleeding top executives. They simply do not have the stability to fight a multi-year billion-dollar war of attrition.
Let's zoom out a bit and look at the post-smartphone war.
If fighting Apple is literally this dangerous, you gotta ask, why risk the whole shebang? Why does OpenAI, a software company fundamentally built on large language models, even need physical hardware in the first place? I mean, why spend over $6 billion acquiring Johnny Ive's startup? Well, because they want to build the iPhone killer. They want to completely define the post-smartphone era and take a direct shot at Apple's most dominant cultural product. And to do that, you need the absolute best hardware designers on the planet. Apparently, OpenAI decided the fastest shortcut was just to rip a page right out of Apple's playbook.
But here's the reality check. Hardware is incredibly hard, and AI hardware is even harder. OpenAI is facing some massive hurdles here. We've all seen those embarrassing public flops, right? Like the whole Humane AI pin disaster. If OpenAI wants to replace the smartphone, they have to invent a flawless new input method, which is probably natural language, but current AI still suffers from massive hallucination errors. Plus, you need serious consumer trust if you're going to ask people to let an AI micromanage their personal lives and data.
And that brings us to OpenAI's worst possible timing.
This lawsuit literally could not have dropped at a worse moment. OpenAI desperately needs a successful IPO to fund their astronomical compute costs. But their biggest rival, Anthropic, has already filed to go public, totally beating them to the punch. Investors are heavily scrutinizing OpenAI's bottom line right now. They want to see a clear path to profitability, not a ridiculously expensive, distracting legal brawl with the most valuable company on Earth.
Which really forces us to ask, will this IPO even survive?
It's a valid question, because this legal fight is just one front of a much larger storm they're caught in right now. We are seeing a massive wave of consumer backlash against AI. Think about it. The entire industry is currently built on unauthorized data scraping, siphoning up the internet's text and art without permission. And now Apple is accusing OpenAI of taking their hardware secrets without permission too. You combine that narrative with high-stakes hallucination errors, privacy fears, and this rising anti-AI sentiment where college grads are literally booing AI at commencement speeches? Yeah. Trying to launch a consumer hardware device right now is an incredibly risky, expensive bet.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. Apple's got the money, the patience, and the track record to drag this out for years. OpenAI is burning cash, losing execs, and fighting intense public backlash. So are OpenAI's consumer hardware ambitions basically doomed before they even get a product on the shelf? Is Apple's legal war of attrition going to force them to abandon this iPhone killer dream entirely and just retreat back to enterprise software? Let that sink in for a minute. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one as this wild tech war continues.